taking place as we speak, and tomorrow is day 2. But joining us now to discuss the crisis around water and water management is Professor Anthony Turton from the University of the Free State Centre for Environmental Management. Thank you very much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
It's a huge event, and you know, human beings, we can't survive 5 minutes without water. It's that precious to us. We've seen the biggest drought in living memory that's just played out, and Cape Town, places like that, still suffering the effects. So water is a big issue. What are they discussing in Durban?
I think the significance of the Durban event is this is a United Nations-led event, and what they're trying to do is bring consensus in thinking now around the use of recycled water. So in other words, what's called grey water or wastewater that comes out of society, typically discarded as waste, that's now being processed back into various forms. And I can give you some examples if you like. Yeah. For example, Singapore is 100% reliant now on recycled water. It's a very thriving and flourishing economy. In the South African context, Windhoek went on to recycled sewage water in the 1980s, and the Durban South sewage works was upgraded in the late 1990s. I was still there when Ronnie Cashel just became Minister of Water Affairs, and he drank the first potable sewage water, and that in fact goes to a paper and pulp industry and to the oil refining industry. Okay. So we don't have to recycle sewage to drink it, we just have to refine it or treat it for purposes other than flushing your toilet.
So this isn't about potable water that we will go to the tap and drink. We're talking about mines and businesses that use a lot of water, and I would imagine, you know, I won't say restaurants because we're probably getting cleaner water there, but industrial use. How far down the track are we in South Africa with that?
Well, I've just mentioned two cases where we, in fact, are world leaders. There's a third example. There's a major desalination plant that's been built in Namibia. I was at the launch, opening about 2 or 3 years ago. That was built by a South African company, Avenge Water, Murray and Roberts. So we have the technology in South Africa, and that is a really major desalination plant. So we do have the technology here. It comes down ultimately to the fact, what is the price of water? What is the true cost of water? Because if you price water correctly, then technologies come to it. If water becomes a free good for all, then it's got no real economic value. Then it's difficult to attract technology. So that is one of the difficult things we're going to have to navigate our way through.
But isn't this then the role of government through institutions like the CSIR to say, listen, water is life, and for us to make sure that our citizens live, we need to develop these technologies?
Yes, the technologies are very sophisticated and it's just existed for a long time. I'll just give you one example now. The Vaal River system that sustains 65% of our national economy has now got a growing level of salt buildup. We've known about this since 2006, since an internal study at the Department of Water Affairs. So I think one of the early adopters of this is going to be a desalination of your mine water and also a desalination of your sewage plant that's feeding into the Vaal River system. So once again, it's not necessarily about making drinking water out of it, but the more salt you can take out of the Vaal River system, the less fresh water you need to dilute it with from the Kutsi Dam.
You talked about desalination. This is one of my bugbears. This planet is 70% water. Why is it that we haven't got to a point we can send rockets out into outer space that we can't desalinate seawater on a cost-effective way?
Well, we can desalinate. All it takes is a fairly substantial amount of energy, and that's the question. We don't necessarily have the energy surplus that we should have. And secondly, the stuff you take out, the salt that you take out, you have to dispose of somewhere. So if you happen to be at the coast, you dispose it back in the ocean, as they're doing it all over the world. If you were inland, for example, I mentioned the acid mine drainage desalination there the challenge is, what do you do with this highly concentrated brine? In the case of mine water, it's also got other elements in it like uranium and other toxic substances. So it's the disposal challenge. And we get down to the fact that there's a raft of technologies, much like the energy sector, where it's not just about wind or solar, it's about a whole bunch of these things. The same with the water sector. No, there's no silver bullet solution, but I think the really good news is that we are asking the right questions now. And tomorrow I will be down at Durban at this event, and I'll be talking in a policy relevant aspect, because it's ultimately going to be policy that's going to create the opportunity for technologies to come in. And then, of course, the other important thing is who's going to pay for this. Is it going to be government that's going to pay for it? Is it going to be private sector that's going to pay for it? Is there public-private partnership? How does that get regulated? How do we prevent the long-term privatization of water? These are very vexing issues, and they're all policy related.
We're talking large scale at the moment. I've got viewers at home now who are wasting tons of water. If we all add it all up, what can we do to join this recycling story?
I think we must all become aware of, firstly, our own water footprints. Secondly, we must become aware of the fact that every human being in South Africa, we've got about 50 million plus human beings, each of us produce, on average, about 100 litres of effluent every day that goes down the sewer somewhere.
Right.
So we have to start thinking about recycling those things. The individual person can't recycle that because they just don't have the technology. However, when we start talking about behavioural change, it's my view that we actually need to teach the kids, because the kids will actually start educating the adults. Because ultimately, it's a good news story if we have a behavioural change. It's a bad news story if we continue business as usual.
All right, finally, perhaps the President also launched this UN report on water. What would be the key themes in this report?
I think the key themes in this UN report is the fact that we have the same volume of water on the planet today as we had when the dinosaurs roamed free. So the water that you drank this morning when you cleaned your teeth went through a dinosaur kidney 63 million years ago. If we understand water as a flux that moves in time and space, that can be recycled theoretically an infinite number of times in our economy, where we can use water of different quality at different prices for different purposes. That's really, I think, what the cut and thrust of it is. They're trying to highlight the role of wastewater, not as a waste product to be discarded, but rather as something of value that can be recycled.
Wow, the economy of water. Thank you very much indeed, Prof, for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us, and wish you the best of luck in your policy discussions tomorrow in Durban. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, so that was Professor Anthony Turton from the University of the Free State Centre for Environmental Management. Teach the kids, that's the big story. Get them onto this water recycling story. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and after that, a story about Chevron. Find out what it is.